monthly economic report for February. It's kind of I don't know how I feel about covering it, because we know that in March it's going to have the big changes in it because it had the big patch. We did have, I think, the announcement of some of the changes at the end of February, so we're going to see some impact. But overall, talking about February is kind of like talking about yesterday's news. But nevertheless, let's have a look. So they again are doing the summary, which is good. I like it. They apparently extended the scale on the production and destruction plot. Okay, good, very good. We can have more production and destruction now. We saw a pretty significant increase in production, which I think probably had a lot to do with dread production on one hand, because we did see more dread brawls than usual in February, and I think looking at the components that were trading high on the market as well, that seems to be the case. One big driving factor. We have to remember though that a lot of this is because this uses average market pricing, right? So mineral prices going up is automatically also a boost to the production value. So even if we produce the same, if the mineral index goes up 10%, then you would expect production to go up as well. And in February, still, we did see the MPI spike more, and so that is one big factor to be considered, but not the only one. So production is high. Production is booming. So that's a good thing. We also saw a mining boost here, although also again, mining boost based on average prices. So an MPI boost is going to also boost mining. That is clear. And the blue line of destruction is, I guess, steadily increasing over the last few months. So overall, if you look at where production is happening, I think clearly more nullsec. Yeah. Pulling it up here, clearly more nullsec. In terms of destruction, it's trading back and forth, but I would say more nullsec and more lowsec. And in terms of mining, we're seeing a shift in the last months away from wormholes and a bit more towards the other pieces of space. So yeah. Futility in chat says MPI hit an all-time high for New Eden. I believe, not certain, but I believe so. Yeah. No, you're right, Futility. It is an all-time high. We're going to see that in a second. And it was good timing for the patch that we know then followed. And at least in the first 2 weeks of March, we saw minerals go down about 5% in each week. So at least a little bit of that patches and the pre-announcement and the patch is already working. Asteroid ore mined down a little bit, gas volume down a little bit, and even ice down a little bit. So you can see what I mean when I'm talking about, mining itself uses the ore value. And so if the ore value increases, then the mining value in the MER increases. We saw all of the volumes go down. Likely moon materials went up in volume. So that's where you see a lot of the increase. Likely, if I can actually check that, if I go back. Or do they have that? No, they don't have that here. All right, we can't see that here. But do they even have the overall? They don't have the overall moon value anymore. Okay, they don't. What we can see, though, very clearly, is that metanox in February was still rising. So the metanox adoption across New Eden has a higher and higher proportion of all moon materials made. And you can see that even R4 is roughly 50%. R8 is, I would say, about 80% of all moon materials created. Same for R16, when we're talking about R32s, we're back to about, I would say, 40 or 50%, and only R64s are the majority mined non-metanox, so manually. So pretty big penetration for metanox following Equinox, and we did see a few quote-unquote nerfs to metanox moon drills where they need more commodities to run, and so the price of metanox moon mining has gone up. So clearly, CCP is trying to manage that. However, as we heard from CCP Rattati last week in the interview that I did with him on Thursday, generally speaking, CCP is happy with how metanox has worked and the mechanics that it has introduced, but I think it relies heavily on people actually now going back to asteroid mining based on the March 12th patch. So the question is, you want to see miners out in space? If miners are mining a lot less moon materials than they were before, clearly, if you look at this graph, then you have to have something else out there for miners to mine and miners to enjoy mining. And that's what this March 12th patch was squarely aimed at. And so that's why we are now looking at what the impact is going to be in March. Looking at chat here, also shows that the amount of R4 to R16 flowing into the game has about doubled with metanox. It's very much so, and you see that reflected in the pricing. R4 and R8 specifically are way oversupplied in the market right now. Higher Brand is asking, does it measure M3? Let's see let's see what it does. This is refinery quantity is calculated on ore mined, refined at 83%. So this is going to have to be M3, yes. Or yes. Units? It doesn't say specifically. Value is calculated by weighted market average price on the day of mining. Oh no, this is overall. This is an ISK, but this one says this one has got to be M3. Yeah. Yeah. The mining efficiency is only 40%. Of course, the higher moons are going to be mined by actual miners. Well, you say yes, of course. Yes, of course. Still, we have also seen penetration in areas where it doesn't make a lot of sense, because so people are still making that trade-off. There's people metanoxing R64 moons, as you can see by this graph. So just because a decision is clear doesn't always mean players are going to make that decision. Let's move over to the money supply. February was one of those months where the money supply shrunk, and that's because let's move over here. That is because mainly, if we're looking at ISK faucets, you can see that they have gone down significantly, which is great. We'll look at the development in a second here, but that's a good sign. And this is pre sales tax impact from the latest March 12th patch. So already we are in a much better place, right? So faucets have gone down in February. If you look at sinks, they have also gone down though. So overall, a bit of a wash. What's keeping this money supply in check right now, absolutely, is the active ISK delta, which is people becoming inactive and people being banned. So GM actions, as CCP calls it. And I think it's a mixture of both. So this month we would have seen the impact of people coming back in October for the Goon move, which was a massive influx. You can see that here on the graph. it's very visible where they did come back in October. Then, as a response, we didn't have a reaction to a big a positive ISK delta for the expansion that came out in November. Instead, we had a steady flow of outgoing ISK from players leaving the game and GM actions, and so you can assume, and from everything I can see, is that it's a mixture of both. It's a net outflow of players, but definitely also a big chunk of bots being banned, because it's a with the current environment that we're in, it's just an issue. So that's what's overall keeping the money supply in check. And so it's going to be very interesting to see what happens after March 12th, when the sales tax is going back from 4% to 7.5%, I think it is. Remember, it was 8% before, so they halved it, and now they're bringing it back more into the direction of where it was up until July. And that is mainly because I think the changes they were hoping to see from 4.5 to 7, says chat. Thank you, Ether. Is the changes that they were hoping to see was that they would see an increase of ISK traded, so ISK velocity, and that really it didn't happen. I think it went mostly under the radar. Yeah. A futility says tax in a video game just feels brutal. Well, but it's it's not a it's not an option to not do that. It's really just a game mechanic to keep ISK flowing out. If you want ISK flowing in, you need ISK flowing out. I think you have to make that argument for like you could also say, okay, let's scrap all taxes, but then we can't have as much ISK flowing in, and then people would say, oh, nerfing ISK faucets doesn't feel like or it feels brutal. It doesn't feel like a video game. So I think you can't have one with the other. If you don't manage the money supply in some way, then what you have is like you have things like WoW, where after 10 years, 20 years, gold is just not worth anything at all anymore. And so we in the grand scheme of things, believe it or not, CCP has been doing a much better job than 99% of other game companies out there in managing in-game inflation for a 20-year-old game. Like, if you think about it, if you compare this to other MMOs, this is incredible. This is pretty incredible. So let's see. Yeah. Increase sales tax in WoW. They probably should. Internet space game death is fun, but internet space taxes aren't. Well, I think this is a big discussion we can have some other time. But yeah, so is supply overall, keeping in check. If we look at the faucets overall, we see blue loot going down a little bit. Rogue drone analysis data going down, so crab beacons going down. Let's see. Bounty prices going up, but there isn't like overall skills and blueprints is one, so that has gone down quite significantly, possibly anticipating the patch. And going down to March, we're going to see transaction tax going back up. You can see here in July, this is when they made the tax cut. This is where a massive chunk of about 15 trillion ISK went out of that sink, and expect that to go back there, and that's going to mean that we're going to have more room for ISK faucets going forward without being at the risk of inflation. And so that's overall generally a good thing from my point of view. I know not everyone agrees. Doesn't CCP refer to EVE as a simulation, not a game? Oh no, if you read the latest dev patch letter, then you will see that they are that they contemplated, Okami made the argument that in the past they might have looked at it too much as a simulation and not enough of a game. And this patch was very much intended to go back into that direction of a game and not a simulation. And I think it's a good argument to make, and it's interesting. I think for a lot of people enjoy the fact that Eve is a fairly good economy simulator, right? I mean, you look at people like me that play the game maybe differently than the mainstream. I love that economic aspect of it, and I love the simulation aspect of it. And naturally, I'm not as impacted by the game part or the game part changes of it. So overall, while I do think it's very, very important for Eve to be fun and a game, I do sometimes enjoy the simulation aspect more. But that doesn't mean that I am not aware of the fact that I have a very particular playstyle. And as a CSM, I'm able to argue in both directions, believe me. So, yeah, this is the money supply over time. Oh, you guys can't see that. Let me see. Let me just show you that. There. So money supply over time is, at least the last 2 months have been okay. I'm hoping that this will go flat over the next few months as well with the sales tax increase. So you can see that after July was here, and after that it's just been a very steady climb, and it was already not in a good way. A lot of this coincides with Pochven and C5 wormholes, but I think we're on a very good path to fixing sales tax and some of these faucets, and then I think we'll be in a good place also for CCP to introduce new faucets, right? And to run things like the Winter Nexus event around Christmas to without causing inflation immediately, and that's, I think, important for them to have that lever. ISK velocity is, you could if you squint, you could see a slight increase in this. I think a lot of this now, these last few weeks that you see here, the last few weeks of February going up is a lot of anticipation of the patch. Big patch anticipation always causes a lot of market movements, but also we've seen production higher, we've seen dread production higher, and so you're just seeing a lot of materials moving, and overall, I'm not surprised that ISK velocity, if you're looking at the last 4 or 5 months, has been in a good place. And that's one of the risks, certainly, of the sales tax increase. So I think there's going to be some people at CCP that are going to argue that if you increase the sales tax now, it's going to hurt velocity of ISK. I don't really think so. I don't think a lot of people have held on to stuff or not sold stuff because of the higher of the higher sales tax. I don't think, if I say it in the opposite way, I don't think a lot of people have sold stuff now because of the sales tax gone down. Like, the only difference really was that I think people stopped going to stopped going to contracts for Plex maybe in some occasions, or skill injectors, because that's where you really, really feel it for the big items. For the smaller items, for shifts, for fits, etc., unless you're trading at like trillion level or alliance level, like, you're really not going to do that. And yeah, as Higher Brand points out in chat, that's certainly the case. Thank you, Cora, for the gifted subs. Appreciate that. Higher Brand says the data show that lowering sales tax does not really affect volume, so inversely raising it won't either. That's that is what I've been telling them, higher brands. So I have been arguing for the sales tax increase going back to where we were at before for 6 months now, right? And now like I would argue that I am the driving factor behind the sales tax increase because I was arguing the hardest for it. And so if you have a problem with it, feel free to aim it at me. That's okay. I'm very happy to discuss the sales tax increase and why I think it's a good idea. Having said that, nobody on the CSM, that I know of really disagreed with me. So I think that overall, generally speaking, looking at the money balance, the is supply balance in EVA 9, I think it's a good move. Crota is asking, on the sales tax increase, is CCP able to follow the ISK and say that a sales tax increase really will take inflation out of the system? Well, whether they're able to or whether they do it, Crota, are two different things, I would say. But jokes aside, I think it's not that simple. I think it's kind of like in the real world economy. It's not always as simple as saying I'm going to turn this up and this is what's going to happen, because you always have 1,000 variables going in. There used to be some very strong opinions at CCP that there was a direct link between sales tax and ISK velocity, but it's not a black and white thing. Among player economists, among CCP devs, there's a ongoing discussion on whether there is a direct connection between sales tax and velocity of ISK and inflation. So I even if they were able to track it perfectly, which they are not, I think that there would still be a big discussion about it. But I would agree. Like I in my opinion, I don't think that a higher sales tax will negatively impact the velocity of ISK per se. Like I think there's 1,000 other factors that have a bigger impact on the velocity of ISK than the sales tax. Because in the end, people don't care. When they made the change in July, like the people that are crying now about the tax increase are the people that didn't even notice the 50% tax cut in July. And I know this because like there was nothing. There was no jubilation, there was no Reddit post, there was nothing in July, right? And people just like to see, oh, numbers go up, taxes go up, and then they just jump to don't take my guns, right? It's like it's not that like you should be relaxed in both situations. Look at what happens, look if there's an impact, and this clearly shows there wasn't a massive increase in the velocity of ISK after they cut taxes. And so what happens is if you cut the taxes and there's no big positive impact, then you're just hurting your ability to introduce new faucets into the game because you're just crippling your sinks. And that's just, it limits game design, and that's why I am 100% for the sales tax increase, and that's why I drove so hard into us getting it. Higher Brand is asking how high a tax is too high. Oh, I mean, I think it shouldn't be much higher than it is now. Like at some point, it just moves things off market, and then you have to somehow find other ways to tax it, right? You don't want all trade going to contracts and then not being able to tax it at all, because at some point, I think if you go over 10%, for example, you're going to drive people off the market, and you're going to drive people into tax evasion, and that's just what's, So you have to find a good middle ground. Aliventi says it's a shame CCP didn't go full value-added tax and have different market tax depending on if you make the item. Yeah. So, I mean, that's basically the Kenneth Feld and Angry Mustache approach from 2-3 years ago. They've pitched it. I think it has somehow died along the way because it's incredibly complex to implement. Like if you ask me, what is the chance of CCP implementing that successfully without breaking the game? I think the chance is 1% that it's successful. Like, if you look at some of the other implementations that we're doing that aren't nearly as complex, that take, a year or two to implement, and then even then they break things. And I'm not saying they break things because CCP always breaks things, just because Eve is a complex game, and Eve has such a legacy about it that it is so difficult to make some of these adjustments. And like, do I think it's a good idea? Yes, it's a good idea. Have we answered all the open questions about that theory? No. Kenneth hasn't, Angry hasn't, and that's okay. They don't have to. That's not their job. But for CCP to implement that, it's 1% success chance. Just add an SAP plugin. Yeah, I feel you, man. Oh no, dude says introduce a more progressive tax for contracts and you might get more activity on the markets, which can be tracked easier. Oh no, dude. Be careful what you wish for, my friend. Be careful what you wish for. We're going to pretend that you never said that. You're hitting me very close to home here, man. But I can't talk about these things. All right. Now, yeah. So MPI, clearly an all-time high. They had to change the graph to make it fit on here. We had, Morphite explode. We had Pyrite, Mexilon at very high levels. So still, like, this is very high. But at this point, I always say what I always say. So minerals are just one component, right? But they are less than a quarter of the economy if you look at the large items and what goes into them, right? Moon materials are very cheap right now. PI is getting ridiculously cheap. With this patch, PI is going downhill, not only because there's a reset button now, but also because capital ships are just going to be using a lot less PI going forward. So all the capital components have had a reduction in not only minerals but also PI. So you're going to see cheap PI, cheap moon goo, and the minerals now are going to be corrected. It's not going to drop immediately, but it's going to be corrected significantly, I would think, from the March 12th patch. So overall, we're in a much better place than we were, a month or two ago with this new patch. So, I mean, and on top of that, we have mining changes that will hopefully also reduce the MPI significantly going forward. So, everyone is poor. No, this is trust me, this is exactly what the player base was asking for, right? People want cheaper ships. At some point, people are going to realize that it's always a give and take, right? It's like there's no such thing as making things dirt cheap without a negative implication on another front. Like there's just no way, because either you either you have high profit margins, or you're paying mining really well, or you're, rewarding risk, or you have dirt cheap ships. And everything in between is a sliding scale, and that's okay. It's just, we have to realize that we're not going to make everyone happy ever. Somebody's always going to get a little hurt about the patch. Crota says, seriously, if I had enough time, I would love to sit down for 6 months and investigate the economy of Eve. Must be a fantastic simulation with real life. Crota, I think it might also be frustrating because it also has some clear limitations, and sometimes you clearly see where it's just, okay, things are out of hand, and let's just introduce a patch. Like this whole reducing input component by 25%, yeah, it does what people want to. They want cheaper ships, so it does that. But it would be much nicer if like that's the brute force attack kind of patch, right? Of course, it would have been nicer if we had enough levers to just nudge the market in the right direction. And clearly, we, looking at this MPI, we were in a situation where it needed like an emergency break rather than some levers. But yeah. Low disk space. Are you doing WeHype? Yes, of course. It's that creator code thing, right? Or what are you referring to? Low disk space. Yeah. So Dave is saying the PI switch button. Yeah, I mean, sure. Thank you, Crota, for the 5 gifted sub again. Yeah, epic. Thank you. So some people are complaining about the PI button. Sure, the PI button is a restart button, not a reset button. So if your extractor heads aren't expired, so aren't run out, then you can't use the button. So it's kind of like it's a halfway there solution. I think even if it's not the full solution, which might still be coming, I don't see like CCP has iterated on this whole PI reset and template thing quite a lot in the last few months. So I wouldn't be surprised if they don't make that change at some point in the future. But even though it is there now, it's still going to be crippling PI prices, I think so many people are going to turn back to PI, and with the reduced demand now, I don't know. Yeah. There's a WeHype thing for Galnet skins that a lot of streamers. Okay, yeah, I don't know, man. I'll get to it. I don't know. I need to read the partner Discord, I think. I'm not very much in tune with the whole I my code, and then I'm good, man. Like this, there's too many integrations, too many things. I just want to talk about the game. If shit gets too complicated, it's not for me. I save my complicated brain for EVE Online rather than the gamification. Also skins, man. Skins wins. All right. Getting to the end of the report here. So this is interesting. Module prices got very, very high, and surely, I mean, part of this is more fight that we're now seeing a fairly high module index here versus ships, but a lot of this is also very temporary because there were we saw a lot of large battles and a lot of large amounts of modules being bought out, so that's driving a lot of these prices. So it's not necessarily a only a resource problem, it's also a short-term availability problem. And I think the market needs to adjust to the increased demand from these battles, from this destruction, to cope with it. So I think this is going to come down in the future, and I think with all the changes that we're seeing in the March 12th patch, both of these are probably going to come down significantly. We're already seeing battleship and battlecruiser prices down 5% across the board this week, just and so I think this is going to be a temporary issue. Yes, people making fun of me saying it's complicated. Well, it's like I don't if you get into the Twitch game of like integrations and on this and raffles here and drops and everything, at some point, you're just doing subathons. No dig at my friend Loru here, who's apparently, I don't know how many hours he's been going, but it looks like the shopping channel over there. Love you, man. All good. Let's see what else we got. Wormholes, I think, is old news, and then we're pretty much done in the MER. All right. That's it for the MER for February, and we're gonna jump into the patch next, I guess.